Well, good morning. Good to see you. If you were here last week, you can go and leave today and tell everybody you have perfect attendance at your church for the year. I can only say that like once a year, so that's my joke I have to do every single beginning of the year. But welcome again. And if you weren't with us last week, we are glad that you have joined us today. And if you are new to Berachah Church, the cards look a little different than they normally do. You wouldn't know that, but would you please still fill one of those cards out? You can mark it first time guest. It says it on there. Leave it on your seat. We would love to send you something that would just say, thank you for being our guest today. We're grateful and honored that you're here with us. And if I have not met you, I would love to meet you. I'll be on the foyer after the service. And so please stop by and just introduce yourself. But we are grateful that you're here. And I know there's some of you, like you have been at Berachah Church for a while and you have yet to fill out one of those cards because you just refuse to. You're that person. I know you're here, and I'm praying for you. I just want you to know I'm praying God changes your heart today. But would you just kindly fill one out? It will help us, not just in our records, but just it'll help you as we better take care of you this year. And so please fill that out. And as Angel already mentioned, there's a place for prayer requests at the bottom. And every day this week, a group of people have been gathering and been praying over the prayer requests that you submitted last week. You may have submitted one last week and have another one this week. Submit it. We want to pray for you. And so fill that out, leave it on your seat, and we'll pray for that as well. And today is day 8 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting. We began doing this from the very beginning of our church history because we realized at the beginning that we were dependent on God and desperate for Him, knowing if God doesn't show up, we have nothing. And it's a sort of a tithe of our year before we get into our year to say, God, we're putting you first in every area. We give Him the very first of the year and invite Him into our lives and our homes and our church. And there's information on our website at placeofblessing.org/fast about what fasting looks like and how you can participate. And we invite you to jump in. Even though it's day 8, jump in right where we're at and participate in that. And there are some prayer guides on the back table that you can use and pray more intelligently. And each weekday, Monday through Friday during this time, we're meeting here at 6 a.m. and Saturday at 8:30 for a time of prayer and worship. And I want to invite you to be a part of that as well. And I'm telling you, it's not always been easy getting here every morning this week, but I am loving every single day of it. And as we begin each day in worship and prayer, God is doing something inside of us and inside of our church, and certainly has done something inside of me. And I want you to be a part of that. So please feel free to come any morning at 6 a.m. Speaking of that, God working in our church and things, would you help me celebrate here today? OH. No, that's fun to celebrate, but that's not really. There's something much greater, much more important that I want us to celebrate. Last Sunday in our service, we had individuals commit to Jesus Christ and fill out the card indicating their decision. And because of God's amazing grace, we had 20 individuals commit their lives to Jesus last Sunday. That's amazing. And all glory be to God for that. And I say to each of you who are just beginning your relationship with Jesus, or if you have had a relationship with Him for some time now, there are 3 things, there are more than that, but 3 main things that you can do today to help grow your relationship with Christ starting right now. 3 tangible things. The first one is commit to weekly attending church. Like, just don't make it optional. And I know sometimes say, yeah, but my mom's cousin's brother's uncle's neighbor is having a birthday party for their 2-year-old twin chihuahuas, and they've invited me. Well, just say, I'm sorry, but I can't attend until after I go and worship God with my church family and hear what God has for me. Just commit to weekly attending church. Just make it a priority unless you're on vacation or out of town. Like, just don't make it optional. Because when it is optional, it's way too easy to let anything become a priority over God. Number two thing you can do. One, commit to attending church every week. Number two, sign up regularly to regularly attend a life group. They're starting back up now. And you don't have to know anything about the Bible, because sometimes people say, well, I just don't know anything. I feel like, but no, I promise you, that's what a small group's about. It's a small group of people that learn together and grow together and help each other. And you don't have to be on the Christian walk alone, because sometimes that feels really lonely. And so sign up and regularly attend a life group. And if you don't know how to sign up, just take that card and put, I want to get involved in a life group, and we'll get with you and we'll get you information about that. So commit to attend church every single week. Commit to regularly attending a life group. And then the third thing is go through the Berachah growth track. If you have not been a part of the growth track, take a moment and sign up now. You can. There's a place on the listening guide that you can text the number. If you don't have the listening guide today, just write on that card, I want to be a part of the growth track. And then you can leave that on your seat. Just fill it out. Just write on it, growth track sign up. Then next Sunday, stay after the service for lunch and for the class. It's as easy as that. And so be a part of that. And those three things will be a great start to help you in your relationship with Jesus Christ, no matter how long you've had that relationship. There's a huge difference between attending church and following Jesus Christ. The Christian life is simply following Jesus Christ one step at a time. And one of the greatest things we can do is to meet together every week just like this, to worship together, to serve together, to learn together, to fellowship together. But the goal has never been for us to do church for the rest of our life. Once we receive Jesus, the goal is for you and I to be the church for the rest of our lives. The goal for us is to continually to follow Jesus Christ, to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And it's impossible to do that if we're not willing to let Jesus change us. We're in week number 2 of our series, Starting Fresh. And for those of you who were here last week, how many of you have changed or are working on changing your flat tire this past week? And some of you are working on it. And some of you tried and you're just kind of a little bit stalled out. Last week we used the analogy of a car with a flat tire, that most of us have something we know needs to be changed. Something that needs to change, and then often in our spiritual life, and often instead of changing it, we make excuses or just keep putting it off. And we know we're not being everything God created us to be, and somehow we just hope that by praying enough that things will fix themselves. Or maybe you began to work on that change, but once again you became discouraged, realizing it would not be easy. And you're here today and thinking, I believe in God. Like, I have a relationship with God, but I don't believe He can change me. I mean, I tried again this week and things just didn't happen. And there are people who attend church year after year after year and have stopped changing. At some point after they accepted Christ, they stopped changing. And churches all across America are filled today with individuals who are just stagnant. Somewhere in the process, they hit a roadblock and said, that's too hard. There's no way I can ever change that. There's no way I could give that up. There's no way I could ever forgive that person. There's no way I could ever give Jesus control of that area. There's no way I can change. And the problem is, if you and I stop changing, we stop walking with Jesus. Because it's impossible to walk with Jesus and stay the same. If we're walking with Christ, He is changing things around us and in us and through us and because of us. And you may openly believe in God, but you honestly don't believe He can change you. And it's not that you've never tried to change. Even this week, perhaps you tried. Perhaps you've tried over and over and over. Perhaps you've prayed and asked God for help, but nothing happened. Or you got a good book on the subject and you read about it, or you listened to an extra sermon, or you accepted advice from a friend, only to end up in the same place you started. Or maybe even a little bit more defeated. Maybe you joined a support group. Maybe you visited a counselor, all hoping for change. But you didn't succeed, and you eventually surrender your hopes for a different life. And so you said, even though I believe in God, I don't really think He can help me. After all, this is how He made me. And you begin to believe a lie. Every day, our enemy is trying to condition you and me to believe the lie that you cannot change. The lie that this is as good as it's going to get. The lie that you can never experience the freedom that Jesus makes possible. I have a friend whose vice is alcohol. It doesn't matter how many times he makes a mess of things. It doesn't matter how many times he hurts and disappoints his family. It doesn't matter how many times he makes a complete fool of himself. He believes he can't change because he's tried and tried and tried and not succeeded. His life is moving backwards, not forwards. Each week, he faithfully sits on the same row at his church, convinced that he can never change. And here's the tragedy. In his mind, this makes him unworthy of God's love. He doesn't believe he'll ever change. He's depressed and miserable and has allowed the enemy to confine him in this personal prison. But here's the good news. God can change him. God wants to change him. But as long as he believes it won't happen, it will never happen. He wrongly believes that God simply can't change him like others who've tried to change and failed. If that's you here today, like I would love today if you would listen through the lens of an ongoing long-term problem that you might have. Because we all have different types of problems. Perhaps you've had an ongoing problem with overspending, or maybe overeating, or overcommitting. For some of you, it might be an addiction that just won't go away. Something you're smoking, snorting, popping, shooting, viewing, or consuming. I don't know what your deal is, but whatever it is, you're trying to quit, and it's something that you just haven't been able to get over. For some of you, it might be an ongoing challenge in a relationship with someone that you love. And you just can't seem to get along with your mom or your sister or your husband or your wife or any number of different relationships. But you just can't seem to get things to where they're working. I want you to listen to this message through the lens of whatever ongoing challenge that you have. In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Jesus is on his way to Galilee and he makes a detour to go through Samaria. He meets with this promiscuous woman at the well in Samaria, and then he goes on to Galilee and ministers there. And when he finishes there, John tells us, beginning in chapter number 5, John 5, verse 1, it says, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. And inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. So we have this pool by the sheep gate. I don't want to be critical at all, but I don't know who the city's master planner was for this community. But for some reason, I wouldn't want to swim in a pool next to the sheep gate. That just sounds weird to me. It's like rice and pudding going together. Like, you shouldn't put rice and pudding together. But my grandma always did. I don't know. You shouldn't put the sheep gate by the pool. I'm sure it was always warm, but that's just kind of gross. In actuality, this isn't a regular pool. This is a natural body of water. And verse number 3 says, crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. And you might say, well, what were they doing there? Like, were they sunbathing or what were they doing? There was a tradition or a belief that an angel would actually stir up the water. And whenever the water bubbled up, they believed whoever got in the water first would be healed of whatever disease they had. And so you can only imagine they might wait days or weeks or months or even years, and then as soon as they would see the water bubble up, like it's a free-for-all to see who can rush down and get to the water first. And one of the men lying there had been sick for how long? 38 years. Think about that. He'd been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him. What did Jesus ask him? Let's say it together. Would you like to get well? Would you like to get well? That seems like an insulting question to me, doesn't it? Like, this guy has been ill for 38 years and Jesus shows up and he says, would you like to get well? That's like asking the broke guy, do you want $100? That's like asking the hungry guy, do you want to go to the buffet with me? Right? This is an obvious question and has an obvious answer. Like, do you want to be healed? Yes, I want to be healed. But this man who has been sick for 38 years does not respond the way that we think he should. He says, I can't, sir. The sick man said, for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. And Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat and walk. And instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath. A moment in the presence of Jesus changed everything for this man. So today I want to talk to you about problems that persist. For 38 years, this man was sick. A moment in the presence of Jesus changed everything. I want to point out 3 significant challenges for problems that persist. Problems that are ongoing. That thing in your life, that flat tire that last week you identified, so I'm going to try again to change it, and perhaps you tried or attempted, and you're like, this is just the way it is. Perhaps you will be able to relate to these things. I want to go through them so we'll all be on the same page. Number 1, if you're taking notes, is this. The longer the problem persists, the more discouraged you become. Some of you, you've had an ongoing problem. It just won't go away. And you've prayed about it for a while, but nothing happened. And you tried what you thought might help it, and nothing worked. And so now you are just discouraged. You tried to work on your marriage and you prayed about your marriage and you were nice for a few days or maybe even a few weeks. And every time you began to stick your neck out, you got whapped upside the head. Maybe you went to counseling together. Maybe you went to church together and your marriage is still bad. And years later, you're like, I don't think anything's going to help. This is just as good as it's ever going to get. And you're discouraged. Maybe you prayed about some physical problem you have. You went to some doctor, you tried another doctor, and you prayed some more, and nothing got better, and you just get very discouraged, even to the point of maybe this is just what God has for me. You prayed about the addiction. You feel shame and guilt and know it's not healthy for you. And you say, never again, and then you do it again. And the shame and guilt hits you again, knowing you need to change. And so you say, this is the last time, only to find yourself doing it again. And you think, I'm so desperate and I'm so discouraged. And it's stealing the joy of life and you are depressed. The longer the problem persists, the more discouraged you become. Here's the second thing. The longer a problem persists, the more excuses you tend to make. Like you tend to make excuses because ultimately it's going to make you feel better if you put the blame somewhere else. And that's what this guy does. He says, Jesus, I have no one to help me get into the water. Nowhere in Jesus' question did Jesus say, hey, do you want to go down to the water? He just said, do you want to be healed? And this guy said, well, I can't. I have nobody to put me into the water. The longer the problem persists, the more excuses we tend to make. When I try to go in there, like this guy's like, when I try to go in there, like I can't walk. Everybody just runs by me. I'm just left there, completely helpless and hopeless. Like no one can help me. Now, I don't want to be too hard on this guy because I've never been in his condition. And certainly it would be difficult. I think we could all acknowledge that. But let's be honest, there might have been a way for him to get close to the water. He couldn't walk, but maybe he could have crawled, right? I mean, for however long he had been there, like one crawl move a day would have at least gotten him a little bit closer. Maybe he could have scooted or rolled or done the inchworm or just a little bit. Whatever it takes to get there. I think over a period of months, I would have figured I could roll or do something. I'd get to the edge of the water. I'd get in a little canoe and like I'd wait for it, and then all of a sudden I'd just roll over something into the water. You see, I just think that somehow I would have said, I can get there. It might take me a while. It might not be this year or next year, but eventually I'm going to get there. But this guy gets to the place that we often get. No one's going to help me out of this. I'm all on my own. I can't do anything about this. It's just the way it is. It's the way I am. We've all been there. Or I've talked to others who say, oh, my marriage is never, ever going to get any better. You see, I've been to the doctors and I've tried. And I'm never going to get a good job. I just can't get a good job. I keep putting in, they don't even call me back. I went to counseling once and it didn't do any good. And I've tried church for 2 weeks straight and nothing's happened. I've tried everything and I can't get any better. The longer a problem persists, the more discouraged you become and the more excuses you begin to make. Number 3, the longer a problem persists, the more you tend to compensate. The longer a problem persists, the more you compensate for that problem. In fact, if I can just say it very directly, most of us right now know people that are excelling at compensating for an issue in their life. I know people who are highly functioning alcoholics, right? They're compensating. Sure, it puts stress on their marriage. Sure, it's a challenge for their children, but professionally, they're highly functioning. People don't know, and if they do know, they don't really care because they have figured out how to manage around it, and they're highly functioning, even though they have a significant addiction. Some of you in your marriage, you've just learned to exist in a very dead marriage. You don't like it, but you accept it. It's just kind of the way it is. You've tried everything you know to do, and yet you have no common vision. There is no intimacy. There is no spiritual movement. You're not trying to invest or impact or impart anything significant into your children. It's more of a business relationship, a partnership. We're just going to stay together for the sake of the kids. This is all we have. We don't really like it, but we know how to manage it. We're just going to stay in this. Some of you, you've learned to compensate for a pornography problem. You tell yourself it doesn't really matter that much, and you've learned to stay away from getting caught, and you think it's not that big of a deal. You're just compensating. Some of you, you've learned to compensate for your overspending. People look at you and think, hey man, you've got it going on. They have no idea that you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you don't even know how you're going to get out of trouble. And you're the master of maxing out this credit card and that credit card and robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you've learned to compensate for it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard guys say, I want to lead my family spiritually. The greatest way to lead your family spiritually is to stop making excuses and lead your family spiritually. Now, here's the problem. Listen to me. You cannot change until you recognize the problem. You will never, ever, ever change when you're tolerating an issue. You cannot change what you're willing to tolerate. You hear that? You cannot change what you're willing to tolerate. The bottom line is, Jesus asked this guy, do you want to be healed? For the sake of the last couple messages, we could say it this way. Do you really want to change? Why would he ask him that? Well, perhaps it's because Jesus knew you can't just help someone who needs help. You can only help someone who wants help. Do you want to be healed? Do you really want to change? And after being involved in ministry to people for over 30 years, I'm convinced there are a whole lot of people who need help, and there are a whole lot of people who even know they need help, but there are very few people who want help. There are some here this morning, and you have sought out help, but you really didn't want help. So you already had your mind made up. If they don't say X, Y, Z or justify whatever I'm doing, like I don't have to listen to it. And here's the thing, because the chaos of your dysfunction is more comfortable than the temporary pain of change. The chaos of your dysfunction, what you're dealing with, what you're going through, is more comfortable because you're used to it than the temporary pain of change. And Jesus asked this very specific question, do you want to be healed? In fact, sometimes people ask, what is the greatest hindrance to faith? What is the greatest obstacle to having real faith? And some people say, well, obviously, doubt is the biggest obstacle to faith. Some people say fear is the greatest obstacle to faith. Some people say worry is the greatest obstacle to faith. All good answers. But I would argue, though, that sometimes what's the biggest obstacle to faith is the familiar, the comfortable, what we know. For some people, the familiar is the biggest obstacle to faith. Well, see, you don't understand. Like for 38 years, I've not been able to walk, and you don't understand. I've tried everything possible, and the early days, like I did a little bit more, and so I got my resume of excuses ready to hand out, and I don't like it, but I've learned to manage around it. And you just start to accept what is, rather than believing what could be. You see, you don't understand. I'm just an average student. I knew that in the second grade, and I know it today, and it hasn't changed. Like you have no idea what I go through. Or our family, we've struggled financially for years. My parents did, I did, my kids probably will. That's just the way it is. Or you don't understand, it's kind of a genetic deal that impacts our lives. You don't understand. If I've tried to overcome this addiction, but I cannot seem to do it. And here's the bottom line. Until your desire becomes bigger than your disability, you will not start to find healing. Your desire must be bigger than the disability. Do you want to be made well? Do you want to change? Do you? Because honestly, some of us are really good at compensating by making excuses. And yes, you're discouraged, but you're simply used to living where you are. And I believe the Spirit of God today would ask you, do you really want to change? Do you really want to change your family? Do you really want to be out of debt? Because for some of you, shopping is the drug of your choice. Do you really want to be in better shape? Because for some of you, eating is the drug of your choice. Do you really want to overcome the addiction that's held you hostage for years? Because some people are more comfortable in the known. Even though because the known it might be uncomfortable, but they're okay with that because it's still the known. Do you really want to find healing in a relationship? Do you really want to be made well? Because you can't help someone who just needs help. You can only help someone who wants help. You cannot change what you're willing to tolerate. Until your desire becomes bigger than your disability, you will not start to find healing. So Jesus asked the question, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be well? And there are people serving in this church that have overcome eating disorders and financial debt and believing there was no way they would be able to forgive somebody that they have, and pornography and drug addictions and drug dealings and prostitution and gangs and self-righteous spirits and critical spirits and so much more. Like we have those testimonies in our church. And I don't care how long you've been down with the power of Christ, you're not out. I don't care how long you've been in bondage to something. When the presence and power of Christ is there, you are not out. That which you gave up on a long time ago is still possible in the presence of our good God. I don't care if it's been 3 months, 30 years, or 60 years. A moment in the presence of Christ can transform everything. And here's what's so amazing. Like we have people, and I could start naming people. I'm not going to do that today, but we have people that we've seen God radically change their lives. That's only a testimony to what He can do in His power. And sometimes our greatest misery, God begins to change into our greatest ministry. There's something that's holding you down, or something that's holding you back. And you've been miserable with it for years. And when God heals you, there's going to be no one as a better evangelist saying, God healed my headaches. God healed my anger. God helped me to overcome my fears. God changed my marriage. God helped my family division. God changed my addiction. And the longer that it's persisted, the more glory you're going to be able to give to God. Because you're going to realize you could not do it on your own. You needed a power greater than that which you had. And the risen Christ came in on the scene. And here's what this guy says. I've got nobody to help me. I've got no one to help me out. And Jesus looks at this guy and says, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. Like get up, pick up your mat and walk. He's making all kinds of excuses, and Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat and walk. In other words, Jesus essentially told him, I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to see your faith. And listen, sir, I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to see your faith. Maybe he's saying to you today, ma'am, I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to see your faith. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Like Jesus is saying to somebody, like, don't tell me I've tried that before, or nothing works for me, or I've done everything possible and I can't change, or this is just the way I am, or it's not that big of a deal. Lots of people have bigger problems than I do. It's not that big. Don't you tell me what you can't do. Jesus is telling this guy, like, don't tell me what you can't do and what you're not able to do and what other people will not do for you. I just want to see you stand up and walk. I will do for you that which you cannot do, but I want you to do what only you can do. Jesus telling this guy, like, I'm going to touch you. I'm going to heal you, but I want to see your faith to do what? For 38 years, you have not been able to do yourself. I want you to have the courage and the faith to step away from the familiar. I'm sure him laying there, being in the condition he was in for 38 years, there had to be something in his mind like, I've tried thousands of times to get up. I quit trying to get up because that never worked before. And Jesus saying, no, I want you to exercise your faith and believe that I can change you. So pick up your mat, get up and walk. Because familiarity is often the greatest hindrance to faith. And you're going to have faith to stand up when you think your legs are not capable of supporting you. Jesus heals the guy supernaturally. I want to point out three things. I want you to notice three things. The sick guy, the sick guy didn't even ask to be healed. Jesus did for him what he didn't even ask Jesus to do. This is one of the million reasons why our greatest priority in life is to press into the presence of God and to get to know his son, Jesus. We just need more of Jesus in our lives. More of Jesus. Keep getting closer to Jesus. That's why when we wake up in the morning, our first words should be, God, today I exist to give you glory. I want to live my life in such a way that it makes a difference for you. My life's not my own. I surrender to you. And as you get to know Jesus, as you press into Jesus, as you get close to Jesus, he will do things you didn't even ask him to do for you. He'll bring healing in your life in areas where you didn't even know you needed healing. He'll change your thought process in ways that you didn't even know you were dysfunctional in. He'll bring forgiveness and healing into your heart in areas where you didn't even know you were sick. When you get close to Jesus, he will do things you didn't even ask him to do for you. Here's the second thing. He did nothing to earn it or deserve it. Jesus did not heal this man because this man was good. Jesus healed this man because Jesus was good. And that's his grace that's available to every single one of us. We can't earn it. We're not good enough for it. We can't give our way to get it. We can't work our way to get it. He gives us blessings untold because of his goodness and because of his grace, and for his glory, he did this. And here's the third thing that you'll notice. The healing did not happen in the way that he thought it would. This guy had thought for years, like, if I can just get into the water, I'll be healed. The healing didn't come through the water. Did you get that in the story? Like, he never made it down to the water. He encountered Jesus. Some of you, you've been searching for the healing and change in a particular way. Through this means or that. Through this person or that person. You're searching for it in the water. And I came to tell you it may not come through the water. It may come through the living water, Jesus Christ, who does something in a way you did not even expect. You expected through one way. And God may bring you a blessing, a healing, a transformation in some way that you never, ever even expected before. And that's the power of our good God. Listen, I don't know what it looks like for you. You may drop your cigarettes in the garbage can as you walk out the door. You may confess to your life group a challenge where you need help. You may need to check yourself into rehab or call a counselor. You may need to open your heart up to receive God's love and His forgiveness and help. No doubt, whatever you do will take a significant step of faith. If some small tweak had helped you overcome the problem, you'd have done that years ago. Do you want to be well? Do you want to change? Do you want to overcome the addiction that has held you hostage? Do you want to be free of worry and anxiety and fear that keeps you up at night? Do you want to be free of an angry spirit that hurts every relationship you're ever around? Do you want to overcome the inability to trust people so that you can begin to trust and have intimacy once again with Jesus Christ and with others? Do you want your marriage to be better than miserable? Do you really want to change? Because God isn't just going to help someone who needs help. He helps those who want help. Do you really want to change? Because there are certain things that only you can do. And it takes faith to leave the familiar. We cannot change what we're willing to tolerate. But if you want to change, in the presence of Jesus Christ, He can change you. And so, God, give us hearts to want to please you. Give us the desire to want help and to want change. And God, help us to be everything you created us to be. Would you continue to speak to us during this time? And with heads bowed and eyes closed this morning, as we are in an attitude of prayer, I want to remind you of something I said at the very beginning. 3 of the greatest things you can do to put yourself in a position to change and to grow in your relationship with Jesus, to press into Him and let Him work in your life, is to commit to weekly attending church. Don't make it optional. Because when it's optional, it's way too easy to let anything else become the priority over God. Second thing that's going to help you in fixing whatever the issue is or changing is to get involved and regularly attend a life group. Walk with people. Learn scripture with people. Hear from God with others. The enemy loves you isolated. Loves you isolated. There's very few people that change in isolation. And then sign up to go through the Berachah growth track, where you can learn God's purpose for you and how to make a difference. Mark your card. Leave it at your seat. There may be others today that your greatest need is to meet Jesus Christ. And you would recognize today that you do not have a relationship with Him. Perhaps you know about Him. Perhaps you've always believed in God, but you don't have a relationship with Jesus. You know that Jesus is God's Son. You know that Jesus came to this earth. He put flesh on and lived a perfect life. Then He let them crucify Him so that He could pay your sin debt and my sin debt. It's the only way you and I could be reconciled to Almighty God. He was crucified in our place. And today's the day you recognize and you realize you need His grace. You need His forgiveness. And today, you want to invite Him into your life. And can I just say, change will be next to impossible without Jesus Christ. But with Jesus, he gives you his Holy Spirit who comes and takes up residence in your life, and he gives you power to begin to change you from the inside out and make some of those changes. And so today, you would recognize, I want to begin a relationship with Jesus. I want to commit my life to Jesus. I surrender my life. I want to quit living for myself, and I want to do it God's way. I want to be reconciled to a holy God so he can help me in this life and I can spend eternity with him. And in the quietness of this moment, with heads bowed and eyes closed, you would just raise your hand and say, that's the decision I'm making today. I know I need a relationship with Jesus. And so today, I'm inviting him into my life, to be a part of my life, to be my life. And you would just lift your hand and say, that's my prayer today. Thank you. I see several hands. Others, that's the decision I'm making. Thank you. I see your hands. And even in the quiet in this room or wherever you're listening online, you could simply call on the name of God. We looked at one of the mornings this week that God is, He wants to hear our prayers. He does hear our prayers. And so I invite you right now to call out to God in the quietness of your own mind. And you could just word it however you want, but you could say something like, God, I hear you. I know I'm a sinner. And because of that, I need a Savior. Jesus, thank you for dying for me on the cross, for taking my place to pay my sin debt. And today, I accept that. God, would you forgive me of my sins? I want to change, but I need your help changing. So God, I want to live for you. And the best I know how, I want to begin to follow you. And if that's your prayer today, that card, we've talked a lot about this service, would you just mark on there, there's a little checkbox that says, I'm committing my life to Jesus Christ. And I won't embarrass you. I want to send you something that'll just help you on how to take your next steps. Some of them I've talked about several times in this message. Show up next week. Get involved in a life group. If you need more information, come see me, come see somebody on the worship team. We'd be happy to talk you through that, tell you what that's about. Sign up for that growth track. You'll get all kinds of information next week. And if anybody, whether today's the day you're accepting Jesus or you've shown up for the 300th time at Berachah Church, we want to pray with you. We want to talk with you. So if you need somebody to talk to today, or you need somebody to pray with you today, as people are walking to the back when we dismiss, would you just walk towards the front? The worship team will be up here, and they would love to pray with you. So God, we thank you for working. We thank you that you are a prayer-answering God, that you're a life-changing God, that you don't want us to wallow through this world, but you want us to have abundant life. And so God, help us to make the changes we know we need to make, and that's only done through you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.